Best for everyone, Ms. Patterson. Daphne's already decided on Mirror Lake Community. My mother said it like she was closing a meeting. Her voice had the smooth surface a small business owner uses on bad days. I sat next to her in the counselor's office. I didn't say a word. Ms. Patterson didn't look at my mother. She opened a manila folder, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid one fingernail under the flap. "Mrs. Marlowe, before we sign anything, there's a letter I need to read." She unfolded the paper. "Dear Daphne Marlowe, congratulations on your admission to Stanford University as a Cardinal Scholar. Full tuition, full housing, full research stipend for 4 years." The Mirror Lake Community College brochure my mother had been holding slipped out of her fingers and dropped onto the carpet. I looked at the postmark on the envelope. December. 6 months ago. I'd written 3,200 hours of caregiving in a notebook nobody knew about. Not one of those hours was going to matter as much as that postmark. If you've ever been the older daughter who held the whole family together, take a second to like this video and subscribe and drop the name of the city or town you're listening from in the comments. I love seeing where this story finds you. I'm Daphne, 18, and this is the story of the 6 months my mother thought she'd buried my future. Let me take you back 5 years. To the year my sister stopped being my sister and started being my job. Spring of 2020, I was 13. My mother came home one Tuesday in May with a key in one hand and a glossy real estate folder in the other. She set both on the kitchen counter, brushed off the front of her blazer, and said, "I bought a rink." My father didn't look up from his laptop. "We talked about waiting. It was the right one." That was the first time I heard about Mirror Lake Ice Studio. It was also the first time my mother said the sentence she would say 1,000 times over the next 5 years. Ashley needs this. Ashley needs the space. Ashley needs the schedule. Ashley needs the focus. Ashley was 10. That weekend, my mother took my sister to the rink for a private session with the new head coach. I sat in the car in the parking lot for 90 minutes doing my biology homework on my knees because the coach was running late, and my mother said it was too cold inside. The car heater clicked on every 3 minutes. I read about cellular respiration. I read the same page 4 times. When my mother came back to the car, she handed me a plastic insulin pen. "Ashley left this in her bag. Hold on to it. If she gets shaky tonight, you know what to do. I'm going to be late from the studio." I'd watched my parents handle Ashley's diabetes for years. I knew the routine. I just didn't know I was about to inherit it. That night, I made Ashley dinner. I counted her carbs out loud the way my dad used to. I drew up her bedtime dose because she said her hands were tired from skating. I checked her sugar level twice. I sat on the edge of her bed until she fell asleep. Then I went downstairs and finished an algebra packet on the kitchen floor because the kitchen light was the only one I could leave on without waking anyone. My mother got home at 1 a.m. She kissed the top of my head and said, "You're an angel, sweetie. Thank God for you." I'd never been called an angel before. It felt good for about 4 seconds. Then she said, "I need you to wake her tomorrow, 5:15. The early ice is the only ice she'll grow on." She didn't ask if I had a test the next day. I did. I got an 88 on it. It was the lowest grade I would get for the next 4 years. I bought a notebook the next month. Blue cover, college ruled, the cheap kind from the drugstore. On the first page, I wrote Day 1. I'm not her babysitter. I'm her sister. By the time I finished that notebook 2 years later, the sentence had become a lie. The second notebook was the same color. So was the third. I bought all of them at the same drugstore. The cashier eventually stopped asking what I needed all the blue notebooks for. She just rang them up. The first big moment that should have changed something happened in October of my freshman year of high school. Ashley was 11. She had a low blood sugar emergency at home on a Friday night. My mother was at a regional coaches meeting. My father was traveling for a client. The number on Ashley's monitor went into the 40s. I knew the protocol. I gave her juice, I gave her glucose tablets. I sat with her on the bathroom floor until the monitor climbed back up to a safe range. It took 52 minutes. I missed my Friday night school play because of it. I had a small part, 3 lines. The drama teacher had given me the part because she said I had a calm voice, and the play needed a calm voice. I never told the drama teacher why I didn't show up. I told her I had family stuff. She nodded like she'd heard that excuse before. She moved on. The next morning, my mother said, "I heard you took care of Ashley last night. Good girl, that's why we have you." That sentence sat with me for a long time. That's why we have you. I think she meant it as praise. Underneath, I heard the actual job description. A few weeks later, my 14th birthday came and went. There was a cake. The cake said, "Happy birthday, Ashley." My mother had picked it up from the bakery on the way home from the rink, and the bakery had written the wrong name on it. And my mother had said, "Oh, well, it's still cake, sweetie." We ate it anyway. I blew out the candles. Ashley sang. My father took a photo on his phone. He never sent the photo to anyone. I checked. I added the cake to the notebook the next morning. I drew a small picture of it. I wrote day 342. I did not write what the cake said. I'd like to say I noticed it slowly. I didn't. By spring of 2023, I was the one who made Ashley's breakfast before school every morning. I was the one who packed her ice bag. I was the one who picked her up from the rink at 6 p.m. and drove her home through traffic in the secondhand car my parents had bought me for one purpose, which was to drive my sister. My mother had moved her office into the studio. My father had moved his office into the basement. Ashley moved between the rink and our kitchen. And I moved the way a ferry moves. Same dock, same dock, same dock. Junior year, I took 5 AP classes. I made captain of the science fair team. I placed in the regional biology Olympiad. I never told my parents about any of it. The reason was simple. The one time I'd brought a regional medal home, my mother said, "That's wonderful, sweetie. Can you go change the laundry? Ashley needs her competition leggings dry by morning." I changed the laundry. I put the medal in the bottom drawer of my dresser, under a stack of t-shirts I'd outgrown 2 years ago. I didn't show her another medal after that. Not out of bitterness, out of efficiency. In May of 2024, the school sent home the formal invitation for the junior honor ceremony. I was junior class salutatorian. I was being given a small scholarship from the local Rotary. The letter was on heavy paper. It had my name on it twice. I left it on the kitchen island. My mother read it. My father read it. They both said congratulations. My mother wrote the date on the family calendar in purple pen and circled it. A week before the ceremony, my mother asked me, casually, what time the program ended. I said 9. She said, "That's a school night for Ashley. Let's see how the recital schedule lines up." I said, "Mom, the school board signs off on the date in February. Ashley's recital is on a different day." My mother smiled the smile she used when she was about to put a thing down for later. "Of course, sweetie. We'll figure it out." I should have heard the warning in her voice. I think I did hear it. I just didn't know yet that I was allowed to walk away from a warning. I had been raised to absorb warnings. 3 days before the ceremony, my mother said at dinner, "Ashley's coach mentioned the rink reserve might shift this week. We'll know by Monday." Ashley looked at her plate. My father looked at his phone. I looked at my mother. I said, "Are you saying you might not come?" My mother said, "I'm saying we have a lot of moving parts, sweetie." Ashley said very quietly, "Mom, it's Daphne's thing." My mother said, "Eat your peas, baby." Ashley ate her peas. I cleared the table. I washed the dishes. I went upstairs to my room and laid out my dress for the ceremony. I steamed the wrinkles out with a coffee mug full of hot water because the iron was broken and no one had bothered to replace it. I had asked twice. I stopped asking. The morning of the ceremony, I was dressed by 7. I'd ironed my dress the night before. I'd made eggs for everyone. Ashley was in her spring recital costume. My mother was pulling on her shoes. We had 90 minutes before the doors opened at the high school. My mother's phone buzzed. She read the screen. She read it again. Coach Anna moved Ashley's recital up an hour and a half. Conflict with the rink reserve at noon. I waited. "Daphne." She didn't turn around. "Your sister's spring recital is now at 10. We can't do both." I still didn't say anything. I just stood by the front door with my hand on the knob. She turned. Her voice softened into the tone I'd come to recognize as performance. "She's special, sweetie. You understand. You know how much this means to her. You'll have other ceremonies." I drove myself to my own ceremony. I sat in the 3rd row. When my name was called and I crossed the stage to accept my salutatorian medal and the Rotary check, the parents section behind me had a perfect rectangle of empty seats in row 2, where my family's names were taped. I looked. I made myself look. A woman 2 rows back caught my eye on the way down. She'd come for somebody else's kid. She mouthed the word, "Congratulations." I nodded. It was the closest thing I'd had to a parent at a ceremony in a year. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my phone. I went to my mother's Facebook page. The most recent post was a photo of Ashley with her recital bouquet. The caption said, "She lit up the stage tonight, so proud of my baby girl." There was no other post that day. There was no other post that week. I closed the app. I opened my blue notebook to the next clean page. The notebook was almost full now. I wrote May 23rd, 2024, day 1452. I think I've been replaced as a person. I sat with the sentence for a while. I didn't cross it out. I underlined it. If you've ever stood at a stage waiting for a family that never showed, drop a single emoji in the comments. Anyone. You're not alone. I see you. That summer I started the Common app. I told no one. Not my father. who was barely home. Not my mother, who I'd stopped speaking to about anything that wasn't logistics. Not Ashley, who I loved too much to put any of this on. I applied to Stanford Restrictive Early Action. I applied to 5 other schools, regular decision. My essay was the truest thing I'd ever written. The title was a single sentence. What I learned from raising someone who isn't my child. I didn't write it for a college board. I wrote it for me. Stanford was the place I sent it because the deadline was earliest, and because the night I drafted it, I stayed up until 2 in the morning reading about a Stanford research lab that studied parentification and adolescent caregiving. The principal investigator was a woman with a kind face and a small, patient smile in her staff photo. I'd never wanted to be in a room with anyone the way I wanted to be in a room with her. I drafted the essay 3 times. The first draft sounded angry. The second sounded sad. The third didn't sound like anything. It sounded the way I actually sounded when I was making a sandwich for Ashley. Flat, patient, steady. I sent the third draft. In October, the Stanford alumni interviewer reached out. Her name was Ms. Cassidy. She also happened to be my AP biology teacher, which I'd never mentioned to my mother because my mother had never come to a single open house. We met at a coffee shop on Pine Street, the one with the green awning. Ms. Cassidy listened to me for 40 minutes without writing anything down. She let me say sentences I didn't think I was going to say. She let me sit through long pauses without filling them. At the end, she set her pen on the table. "Daphne, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think before you answer." I waited. "Do you actually want to leave?" I'd never been asked that question by an adult. Not by my father, not by my mother, not by my school counselor in any of our scheduled meetings. I said, "Yes." "How far?" "As far as I can." She nodded slowly. "I'll write what I saw. I'm going to be very clear with the committee. I think you've earned every word of it." I drove home. I put on a pot of pasta for Ashley. I did not tell anyone about the interview. My mother thought I'd been at a tutoring session with a kid named Brandon. I told her his name was Brandon because I'd seen a kid named Brandon on a flyer at the rink, and the name was easy to remember. In November, I did something I'd never done before. I called Dr. Bates's office on the patient line, the line I'd called 100 times over 4 years to book Ashley's appointments. I pretended I was calling to confirm next week's visit. The receptionist paused. "Ms. Marlowe, your sister's appointments were spaced to quarterly back in September. Dr. Bates cleared her for independent functioning. There's nothing on the books until February." I hung up. I haven't written it in the notebook yet. I didn't know what to write. Ashley walked into the kitchen 10 minutes later. She was in her practice clothes. She looked at me. She said, "Are you mad?" I said, "No, baby." She said, "You look like you are." And I thought, maybe I am, just not at you. That night, I checked the mailbox at the front of the house at 8, at 9, at 10. Stanford's REA decisions were due in 8 days. There were a couple of bills, a Best Buy flyer, a brochure that hadn't been there the day before from Mirror Lake Community College, addressed in my mother's handwriting to herself. I closed the lid. I went back inside. 8 days became 7, then 6, then nothing. On December 8th, I logged into the Stanford applicant portal at 6:14 p.m. from my laptop. The decision page said, "Decision available." I clicked the link. The page took an extra second to load. When it did, the page header said, "Status: Declined offer of admission by applicant on December 14th. I read it 3 times. The 14th was 6 days ago. I had not declined anything. I had not declined anything to Stanford. I had not opened that portal since the day I submitted my application back in October. I sat in my desk chair for 4 hours. I did not cry. I did not get up. I did not check my phone. The room got dark around me without me noticing. The radiator in the corner clicked on at some point. My laptop fan ran loud and then slow. I opened the notebook. I wrote, December 8th, someone declined Stanford in my name. The next morning was a Sunday. My mother was at the studio for Sunday session. My father was in the basement office. Ashley was sleeping in. I went out to the front porch. There was a small cabinet by the door where my father stored a spare key for the mailbox and the old slips for any certified mail my mother had signed for over the years. I'd seen it open 100 times. I'd never gone inside it. I opened it. There were 3 envelopes inside. All 3 had a Stanford return address. All 3 had been slit open along the top. All 3 were empty. The postmarks read December 8th, January 19th, and March 15th. I sat on the porch in my pajamas for a long time. The morning was cold. A neighbor across the street brought in her newspaper. She waved. I waved back, the way you do when you don't want a stranger to know your day has just stopped. I took the 3 empty envelopes into the kitchen. I laid them on the granite countertop in a line. I took a photo on my phone with the postmarks clearly visible. I took a second photo with a ruler against the edges to show the slit pattern. I put the envelopes back into the cabinet exactly the way I'd found them. Then I opened my school email and started a message to Ms. Cassidy. Hi, Ms. Cassidy. I need to talk to you. I think I was admitted to Stanford, and I think someone in my house declined the offer in my name. I'd like your help figuring out what to do next. I'm sorry to email you on a Sunday. I hit send. Then I made breakfast for my sister. Pancakes. She liked them with bananas. I sliced one into perfect coins because perfect coins were the kind of detail I could still control. Ashley came down at 9. She sat at the kitchen island and ate. She said, "You're up early." I said, "Couldn't sleep." She studied me. She said, "You okay?" I said, "I'm okay." She nodded. She ate the rest of her pancakes. She didn't ask again. She was 15. She had been doing this dance with me for years. She knew when I needed to be left alone with a thing. She also knew when not to ask the question that would make me have to lie. I watched her chew. I thought in 8 months I might be 2,000 miles away from this kitchen. And I felt for the first time since opening that portal, the sense that I might actually survive this. Ms. Cassidy called Stanford admissions on Monday morning before her first class. She called me Monday afternoon. She did not sound calm. "Daphne, Stanford's confirmed the admission. They've also confirmed the decline. The decline was submitted via the portal on December 14th at 11:38 p.m. from an IP address registered to your home network." I was driving home from picking up Ashley. I had to pull over. The Stanford admissions office flagged the submission at the time, she went on, because the decline form has a free text field at the bottom, an explanation field. Yours read like a press release. The writing style didn't match the application essay. They put the slot on a verification hold. They held my spot. They held your spot. They were waiting for you to come back. They thought a parent might have interfered. They've had this happen before. I closed my eyes. I could hear Ashley humming in the back seat. She was humming the tune from the recital. 3 years she'd been humming that tune. I'd stopped hearing it as music a long time ago. Now it was just the sound of my life. What do I do, Ms. Cassidy? You let me help you. I want to bring this to the principal and to Ms. Patterson, the senior counselor. We're going to do this carefully. We're going to do this on paper. I'm going to need everything you have. I drove home. That night, after Ashley was asleep, I sat at my desk with my laptop open. I checked the browser history on my own machine. I scrolled back to December 14th. At 11:38 p.m., there was a session on Stanford's applicant portal. I'd already been asleep for an hour and a half. I'd been wearing earplugs because Ashley'd had a recital weekend, and the house had been loud since 6 a.m. I scrolled further. December 15th, at 1 in the morning, my browser had visited Mirror Lake Community College's open house registration page. I checked Quicken, the family finance program my parents used. I had access because I was the one who tracked Ashley's coaching invoices. There it was. November 15th, an $11,200 withdrawal from my 529 plan. The memo line read, Daphne tutoring, Bates therapy. I had not tutored anyone in November. Ashley used a pediatric psychiatrist named Dr. Bates through our family insurance. Dr. Bates did not bill out of a 529. Dr. Bates didn't bill at all when sessions were covered. Dr. Bates also, according to her own front desk, had not seen Ashley since September. I sat at the desk with my hand over my mouth. I did not cry. I'd stopped crying around month 4. I just sat there. The house was quiet. I could hear the radiator click. I could hear the dishwasher running its last cycle downstairs. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears the way you hear it when you put your head underwater. I thought, my mother is a thief. I scrolled the Quicken history further. There was a pattern. In January, $2,000 had moved out of my 529 into Ashley's training fund, labeled Daphne SAT Prep Tutoring. I had never taken SAT prep tutoring. I had studied for the SAT from a used review book Rebecca, my lab partner, had passed down to me. In February, 1,400 had moved out under a memo labeled Daphne Summer Enrichment Program. There was no enrichment program. In March, 3,000 had moved into a vendor I did not recognize called Coastline Coaching Group. I looked up Coastline Coaching Group. It was Ashley's elite coach in another state, the one I'd been told we couldn't afford to send her to. We could afford to send her to it. We could just afford to send her to it on my college money. The amounts on the screen did not feel like the largest betrayal in the room. The memo lines did. My name. Over and over. Like she'd written my name on the front of a coat and then walked off in it. I took screenshots of every line item from the past year. I made a folder on my laptop and named it for later. I knew, sitting there, that later was going to come. I opened the patient portal I'd used to book Ashley's first appointment back when I was 14. The login was still mine. I typed a message. "Hi, Dr. Bates, this is Daphne. I'm Ashley Marlowe's older sister. Has my sister attended sessions with you in the last 9 months? It's important. Thank you." I sent it. I closed the laptop. I went into Ashley's room. She was asleep on her side, mouth open, the way she used to sleep when she was 6. I sat on the floor next to her bed for a long time. The phone buzzed in my pocket, Dr. Bates's office reply. "Daphne, this is unusual for me to answer directly, but yes, Ashley has not attended sessions since September 15th. I cleared her for independent functioning at our last meeting. Your mother has requested several additional sessions since then. I've declined them as clinically unnecessary. Please call my line if you need to talk. I'd like to talk." I read it twice, then I put the phone in my pocket. Ashley stirred. "Daph." "Yeah, baby. You okay?" "I'm okay." She rolled over. She mumbled, "I don't want to skate tomorrow." I said, "Then don't." She opened one eye. "What?" I said, "Sleep, Ash. We'll talk in the morning." She closed her eye. She was already half asleep. She said, "Don't leave." I sat on the floor of her room until I heard her breath go even. It took 26 minutes. I counted. I had been counting things in this house for 5 years. I waited until our mother was at the rink Sunday afternoon. I sat on the floor of Ashley's room with my back against her bed. She sat across from me, cross-legged, picking at the carpet. I told her the truth, all of it. The 3 envelopes, the portal decline, the 529, Dr. Bates, the brochure my mother had ordered, the 2 trips a year my mother took to Mirror Lake Community College admissions to talk to a real advisor, while I sat home doing Ashley's homework. Ashley listened the way I'd taught her to listen when she was 8, and her diabetes monitor went off and she had to focus past the alarm. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Mom told me you were going to local college." "When?" "In December." "She said you decided. She said you wanted to stay home and help me practice. She said your essay didn't get into anywhere good." I let that sit between us. I didn't react. Ashley's voice went smaller. "Daph, Mom said I couldn't see Dr. Bates anymore because I'd be too independent and then I'd peak too early at 16 and not at 18. She said the doctor was the one telling her to keep me in. She said the doctor was being too cautious." "Dr. Bates cleared you in September, baby." "Dr. Bates cleared me?" "Yes." She looked at her hands. "Then why did I do 5,000 hours of ballet and dance in 9 months?" "I don't know." Ashley closed her eyes. She started shaking. Not a panic attack. Something quieter. The kind of shaking that comes when a body finally tells the truth it has been holding back. "Daph, I don't want to skate. I don't want to dance. I have never wanted to skate." "I know. I wrote a paper in 9th grade English. I wrote about Dr. Bates, about what therapy felt like. I wanted to study psychology. Mom said it wasn't an appropriate topic. She made me rewrite it about my recital. I didn't even rewrite it. She rewrote it for me." She put her face in her hands. "Daph, I'm so sorry I was your job. I never asked for you to be my mom. I just didn't know how to ask for our actual mom." I crossed the room. I sat next to her on the floor. I put my arm around her the way an older sister puts an arm around a sister. Not the way a parent does. the way a sister does. It was the first time in 5 years I'd held her that way. She cried for 40 minutes. I did not cry. I cried a little later, alone, in the shower. But in that hour, on her bedroom floor, I was steady. When she was done, she said, "What do we do?" I said, "I do something. You stay out of it. You let me carry it from here." She said, "You've been carrying it for 5 years." I said, "I'm carrying it for the last time. Then you and I just get to be sisters." She wiped her face on her sleeve. She said, "I want that. I want the sister version. I don't even know what that looks like." I said, "Me neither. We'll figure it out." She nodded. Then she said, "Daph, there's something else." I waited. In April, 2 months ago, I came home from the rink early because Coach Anna had a migraine. I came in through the back. Mom was on the phone in her office. She said your name. She said, "Daphne thinks she's going somewhere. We're handling it." I didn't know what it meant. I didn't ask. I should have asked. "You were 14, Ash." I was 14 for the rest of the conversation, too. She said, "Don't worry. The brochure's already in the house." I didn't know what brochure. I went upstairs. I went to my room. I put on my headphones. I just didn't want to know. She looked at me. "Daph, I think I knew. Some part of me knew. I just couldn't carry it." I reached over. I put my hand on the side of her face. I said, "Then I'm glad you didn't carry it. You weren't supposed to. That's the whole point of this." She closed her eyes. She let me hold her face for a long moment. Then she said, "I don't know who I am if I'm not the kid in skates." I said, "You're allowed to find out. That's what 15 is for." She said, "Mom never told me that." I said, "I know. I'm telling you that. Right now, you're allowed to find out." She nodded. Then she said, "The way a 15-year-old says something she has rehearsed in her head 1,000 times. Daph, whatever happens with Mom, don't lose Stanford." I looked at her. I said, "I'm not losing Stanford. Stanford is the one thing in this house that no one can take from me anymore." She nodded again. We sat on the floor for another 20 minutes. Neither of us said anything else. The afternoon light moved across the wall. I closed her door when I left. I made dinner. My mother came home at 7, asked me how Ashley's practice schedule was looking, and went straight to her desk. She didn't notice my sister's eyes were red. She didn't ask. She didn't look up. It was the last week of her not noticing. The plan came together in late April. Ms. Cassidy met me at the coffee shop with the green awning. She had a folder. She set it on the table between us. "This is what I have. Stanford has confirmed the admission and held the slot. They've provided the IP log of the decline. They've also waived the deadline for your response by 90 days because of the verification hold." She looked at me. "You have until graduation to formally accept." "I'm accepting." "I know, let's do it cleanly." She slid me a paper. I signed it. She slid me a second paper. I signed it. The third paper she didn't slide. She held it. "This is a complaint form. Stanford has the option to refer the unauthorized portal access to law enforcement under federal wire fraud statutes. They will not file unless I tell them to. The decision is yours." I thought about Ashley's face on the floor. I said, "Don't file yet. Let the rest of it happen first." Ms. Cassidy nodded. I thought you'd say that. You don't need a federal case to do this. You just need a room. She slid me a fourth paper. It was a Stanford letterhead with a name on it. Dr. Elliot Reinhardt, Director of Bay Area Outreach. He's flying out for your senior honors convocation. He's going to present the Cardinal Scholars Award in person. The principal has been briefed. Ms. Patterson has been briefed. Your mother will not know. Your father will know 2 days before the event when I personally tell him. He'll tell her. I don't think he will. I think he's been waiting for someone to give him an out for years. We're giving it to him. 2 nights later, my father took me to Olive Garden alone. My mother and Ashley were at an away competition in another state. Ashley had a strep throat that meant she couldn't compete, but my mother had taken her anyway, just to keep her in the rotation. My father did not order wine. That was the first sign something was different. My father always ordered wine. He said, "Daphne, I'm leaving." I waited. I'm taking a transfer to Seattle in July. I'm filing for divorce in August. I've already moved 60% of our joint savings to a personal account. I've already retained an attorney. Your sister can come with me. So can you. I should have done this 5 years ago, and I didn't because I was a coward, and I am sorry. I didn't say anything. He put a printout on the table. It was the joint account statement. There was a $34,000 withdrawal in February. The memo line read, "Studio operating costs." He said, "Your mother is bleeding the rink. She's been bleeding it for 2 years. She kept telling me Ashley needed it. She kept telling me, you'd be fine on a community college track because you were stable enough to be fine." I let her tell me that. I let her tell me that because the version of the story where it was true was easier to live with than the version where it wasn't. I reached into my own bag and put a folder on the table. I showed him the photo of the 3 empty envelopes. I showed him the Quicken withdrawal. I showed him Dr. Bates's message. I showed him the IP log Stanford had sent me. I showed him the screenshot of the brochure registration page from my own browser history that I had never visited. My father read everything in silence. He read it twice. He took off his glasses. He pressed the heel of his hand against one eye, then the other, then both. When he was done, he covered his face with both hands. He said, oh God, Daphne." I said, "Dad, are you going to be there on June 10th? He said, "I'm going to be there." I said, "Don't tell her." He said, "I won't tell her. I should have done 100 things differently. This one I won't get wrong." The waiter came. He asked if we needed anything. My father, very quietly, asked for the check. He paid in cash. He left the waiter a 40% tip. I'd never seen him do that before. In the parking lot, he turned to me before he opened the car door. He said, "Daphne, did you cry?" I said, "Sometimes." He said, "I'm sorry I didn't notice." I said, "I made sure you couldn't." He nodded. He drove me home. We didn't speak the whole way. When he pulled into the driveway, he sat with the engine running for a moment. Then he reached across the console and squeezed my hand once. He had not held my hand since I was small. That was the night I started thinking my father, somewhere underneath everything, was still my father. Not all of him, but enough of him. The college counseling appointment came 2 weeks before graduation. My mother insisted on coming to support the decision. I let her come. Ms. Patterson opened the door, said, "Mrs. Marlowe, Daphne, come in," and let us sit. My mother began without being asked. She slid the Mirror Lake Community College brochure across Ms. Patterson's desk like she was passing a settlement offer. Best for everyone, Ms. Patterson. Daphne's already decided on Mirror Lake Community. It's a wonderful program. It's by my studio. She'll be able to keep helping her sister practice. We've already discussed it as a family. Ms. Patterson smiled politely. Mrs. Marlowe, before we sign anything, there's a letter I need to read. It came in March. She opened the folder. She pulled out a sealed envelope. She had read the letter twice already that week with me in private rehearsal. Today, she read it like she'd never seen it. Dear Daphne Marlowe, congratulations on your admission to Stanford University, class of 2029. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Cardinal Scholar. Your award includes full tuition, full housing, full board, and a 4-year research stipend. My mother's hand was on the brochure. The brochure slipped out of her fingers and dropped onto the carpet. The room was quiet. I could hear the air handler in the ceiling. I could hear the second hand on the wall clock. I could hear my mother's breath catch on the inhale. My mother said, "There must be a mistake." "There isn't a mistake, Mrs. Marlowe. Daphne declined this letter back in December. I was there when she made the call." I looked at her. I did not say anything. I let her keep digging. Ms. Patterson opened the folder again. She slid a second piece of paper across the desk. The Stanford header. The IP log. There was no call, Mrs. Marlowe. The decline was submitted on the applicant portal on December 14th at 11:38 p.m. from a device on this family's home network. The Stanford Writing Committee flagged the submission because the explanation field was written in a style that did not match Daphne's application. The Stanford office contacted Daphne's interviewer through her school address. The slot has been on a verification hold for 6 months. My mother stood up. "This is outrageous. You can't accuse me of..." "Mrs. Marlowe." Ms. Patterson's voice was calm. "Sit down. The Stanford office has chosen not to pursue federal charges at this time. They were waiting to see if Daphne accepted the offer." My mother sat down. Her hands were on the arms of the chair. Her hands were shaking. I had never seen my mother's hands shake before, not at the studio, not in a fight with my father. Not even the morning she'd buried her own mother 3 years ago. Now she was shaking like a person who had just understood, for the first time in this room, that she might not be in charge of what happened next. I spoke for the first time at the appointment. My voice was level. I felt steady. I'd waited 5 years to feel steady in a room with my mother. It turned out steadiness was not loud. It was just steady. I said, "I'll be accepting it today." My mother turned to me. She looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has done something inexplicable in a parking lot. She said, "You can't do this. Ashley needs you." I said, Ashley needed a sister, not a substitute parent. She also needed a mother who let her see her actual doctor. My mother flinched. She tried a different angle. Her voice softened. She turned the corners of her mouth up. I had seen her do this with rink parents who were threatening to pull their kids. I had seen her do it with vendors who were threatening to send invoices to collections. I had never, until today, seen her aim it at me. "Daphne, sweetheart, listen to me. I know this looks bad. I know what it looks like, but the Stanford program is across the country. You don't even know anyone there. We can revisit this in a year. You can do a transfer year. We can make it work. Mirror Lake Community is 20 minutes from home. You can be home for dinner. Ashley needs... Mom, she stopped. I said, I am not transferring in a year. I am not staying home. Ashley does not need me. Ashley needs you. Ashley needed you for 5 years. Ashley needed you to be her mother instead of her agent. You decided to give her your career instead of your time. That is not on me. I am not paying for that anymore. The room was very quiet. My mother said, in a much smaller voice than I had ever heard her use, Daphne, you don't know what you're saying. I said, I know exactly what I'm saying. I wrote it down for 5 years before I said it out loud. I slid the blue notebook across the desk to Ms. Patterson. The cover was scuffed from 5 years of being carried in backpacks and tote bags and gym duffels and tucked behind binders. This is 4 years of caregiving documentation, 3,200 hours. At local minimum wage, that's about $48,000 of unpaid work. There's also an $11,200 withdrawal from my 529 plan with a falsified memo line. Dr. Bates has confirmed in writing that she did not see my sister at any point during the time period the withdrawals were posted. My mother said, Daphne, don't do this. I said, it's done. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. Behind me, I heard Ms. Patterson say, Mrs. Marlowe, before you leave, there's a question about a 529 withdrawal. Please stay. I walked out into the hallway. My father was waiting at the end of it, hat in his hands. He'd been there the whole time, just outside the door, in case I needed him. He said, how did it go? I said quietly, just like we planned. He nodded. I said, she's still in there. They're going through the 529. He said, then she's going to be in there for a while. I leaned against the cinder block wall of the hallway. I closed my eyes. I felt for the first time in 5 years what it was like to set something down. Not throw it, not break it, just set it down on the floor next to me and step away. My father said, Daphne, listen, I want you to hear this. You did not deserve any of it. I said, I know. He said, say it back to me so I know you know. I opened my eyes. I said, I didn't deserve any of it. He nodded once. He said, now let's go home. Or wherever home is. We'll figure it out. June 10th, 2025, a Tuesday. The auditorium was full an hour before the program started. The senior honors convocation was the biggest academic event of the year in our district. The school had sold every parent ticket and had a live stream for grandparents and out-of-state family. The lights came up. The program began. My mother was in row 3, dead center. She was wearing a cream-colored dress. She was holding the Mirror Lake Community College brochure, the same brochure I had watched her drop on a counselor's office floor 2 weeks earlier. The brochure had a small tear in one corner now. She was still holding it like an offering. Like the offering had not been refused yet, because she had not yet been forced to look at the refusal. Ashley was in row 5, 2 seats over to the left. She wasn't sitting with my mother. She was sitting with my father. She'd asked to. He'd said yes. I sat in the VIP section to the left of the stage. I was wearing the dress Ms. Cassidy had helped me pick out 2 weekends earlier, navy blue. simple. Across my shoulders was the gold sash of the highest academic honor in the senior class. I had not told my mother about that either. Mr. Holcomb, the principal, walked to the microphone. "Good evening, friends and families. Tonight, we recognize the very best of the class of 2025. We have a special program. We have a special guest." He paused. "Before I begin, I want to introduce a Stanford University representative who has flown across the country tonight for one student. Please welcome Dr. Elliot Reinhardt, Director of Bay Area Outreach for Stanford University." The auditorium went quiet in that specific way an auditorium goes quiet when a stranger walks onto its stage. My mother turned in her seat. She looked at Dr. Reinhardt. Then she looked at the back of my head in the VIP row. She did not, at this point, understand. I watched her piece it together in stages from the corner of my eye. First, she registered the suit, then the medallion case in his hand. Then, the way the principal stepped back to make room for him at the podium. Dr. Reinhardt cleared his throat. "Good evening. I'm here tonight on behalf of Stanford University to present one of the highest honors our institution awards. This year, 15 students in the United States have been named Cardinal Scholars. They receive full tuition, full housing, full board, and a 4-year research stipend. They are the finest applicants we have seen this admission cycle. Tonight, I have the privilege of giving the medallion to one of them in person." He turned to the principal. "Mr. Holcomb." The principal nodded. "Will Daphne Marlowe please come to the stage?" I stood. The auditorium turned. 3,000 pairs of eyes followed me. I walked. The heels Miss Cassidy had loaned me clicked against the wooden stage. I felt very calm. I felt like I had felt the night I told Ashley the truth on her bedroom floor. I reached the podium. Dr. Reinhardt shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, Daphne." He clipped the bronze medallion to the front of my dress. The LED screen behind us lit up with the offer letter. The letter was 20 feet tall. In row 3, my mother's mouth opened. The Mirror Lake Community College brochure slid out of her hands. The live stream camera captured the moment in real time. There were 11,400 people watching at home. The replay would show her face for 2 full seconds. 2 seconds is a very long time on the internet. Mr. Holcomb stepped back to the microphone. In addition, Daphne is this year's senior class valedictorian. She holds a 4.0 GPA across 5 advanced placement subjects. She has been named a National Merit Scholar. She placed in the National Biology Olympiad. She has been the senior captain of our robotics team. And she has done all of this while serving as the primary caregiver to her younger sister for over 5 years. He paused. I felt him pause on purpose. I have known Daphne Marlowe since she was 13 years old. I want every parent in this room tonight to take her name home and remember it, because that name belongs to a young woman who carried more than any teenager should ever have to carry. And she carried it without telling any of us. The room applauded. It was the kind of applause that builds the way a wave builds. Some people stood up, then more people, then most of the room. The clapping was different from any applause I had heard at this school before. It was the clapping of a town that had just realized it had missed something for years. Dr. Reinhardt stepped to the microphone next. He had a folded piece of paper in his hand. He read from it. "On behalf of Stanford University, Daphne, we want you to know that your Cardinal Scholars selection was unanimous. The committee read your essay and stopped at the third paragraph. They did not need to read further. 2 members of the committee wept. I have been with this university for 18 years. I have never delivered this medallion in person. I have flown out tonight because, on behalf of the institution that admitted you, I needed you to receive it from a human being who could tell you to your face that we see exactly what you are. We are proud to count you among the cardinal. He stepped back. He gave me the floor. I had not prepared remarks. I had not been asked to speak. But the room was waiting. I stepped to the microphone. I took one breath. I looked at row 3. My mother was not making eye contact with anyone. The brochure was on the floor next to her foot. I made myself stop looking. I looked at row 5. My sister was watching me. My father was watching me. He had his hand on the seat in front of him to keep himself steady. I said, "Thank you." I want to say only one thing tonight. To anyone out there who has been told they are the practical one, the steady one, the one who can wait, the one who will be fine. You are allowed to want something for yourself. You are allowed to want it loudly. You are allowed to want it now. You do not owe your dreams to anyone else's specialness. Your specialness is not a debt. It is yours. I stepped back. The applause went again, louder. In row 5, my sister stood up. She did not look at my mother. She walked down her aisle. She walked across the front of the auditorium. She climbed the 3 steps onto the stage. She was holding a small bouquet of yellow roses. I had not known about the roses. She told me later she'd bought them with her own coaching tip money, the kind of money I would normally have had to ask my mother for permission to access. She handed me the bouquet. Then she leaned in and said, in my ear, "I'm so proud to be your sister, Daph." I held her. I held her until the applause stopped. If you've ever been the daughter who held everything together while no one saw, if you've ever been the eldest who had to be the parent, please know this. Setting a boundary is not betrayal. It is the first honest thing you can say after years of saying nothing. Like this video and subscribe if her story is also yours. There are so many of us. So many of us. After the ceremony, my mother found me in the hallway. She stood 5 feet from me, her purse pressed to her chest, the brochure crumpled now in her left hand. She said, "How could you do this to your sister?" I said, "I didn't do anything to her. I stopped doing your job for you." My father stepped next to me. He said, "Pamela, we'll talk tomorrow, with lawyers." My mother turned. Ashley was standing 3 feet away, holding my free hand. Ashley said, "Mom, I quit ice dancing. I told Coach Anna last week, I'm sorry, I just couldn't anymore." My mother looked at my sister. She looked at me. She looked at my father. She did not look at any of us long enough to see us. She turned. She walked out of the auditorium. The brochure dropped from her hand somewhere in the lobby. A janitor would pick it up the next morning. I would see the photo of it on Instagram before noon. Half the school had already known the story by then. Half the school had known for weeks. It is harder to keep a secret in a small district than my mother had ever been willing to believe. I held my sister's hand. My father put his hand on my shoulder. I had carried the family for 5 years. I'd carried my sister for 5 years. Tonight, for the first time, my sister was carrying part of me back. A few weeks later, my father finished the divorce filing. Ashley moved with him to Seattle in July. She started seeing a real therapist on the first Tuesday she got there. She has not been on the ice since. The first week she was in Seattle, she texted me a photo of a coffee shop bulletin board. She'd circled a small green flyer with her finger. The flyer was for a volunteer reading program at a children's hospital. The caption on her text said, "I'm signing up. They need somebody who's good at sitting still with sad kids. I'm good at that. I learned from somebody." I made myself sit down before I read it twice. I read it twice. I cried for the first time in 3 months. Quiet, just at my desk. The Pacific fog was still on the window. I wrote her back. I said, "You learned from somebody who learned from you, too." She sent a heart. She sent a second heart. She did not ask for anything else. That, I think, was the first sister-sized text I had ever gotten from her in my entire life. The Mirror Lake Investors Group quietly pulled out of my mother's rink 10 days after the convocation. The convocation footage spread further than any of us expected. 2 prospective sponsors saw it. They asked questions. The rink could not answer them. The rink closed 3 months later. The Stanford complaint about the unauthorized portal access was filed in August. The 529 misuse went to a separate audit. My mother retained a lawyer. The lawyer recommended a settlement instead of trial. The settlement reimbursed the $11,200 to my account plus penalties. My father insisted on it. Ashley texted me from her new bedroom in Seattle on the 1st of August. "Just started therapy with someone new. Real this time. Tell me about Stanford." I sent her a photo of my dorm room window. The Pacific fog was so thick that morning you could not see the bay. I told her the fog burns off by 10. I opened the blue notebook on my desk, the same notebook I had been writing in for almost 5 years. The cover was scuffed. The spine was cracked. I'd been keeping it on the corner of every desk I'd ever sat at. I opened it to the next clean page. I wrote, "Day 1838. I'm not a babysitter. I never was. I was a sister who didn't get to be one. Until now." Then I closed it. I put it in the bottom drawer. The brochure my mother had carried to my future did not decide it. The postmark did, and the postmark belonged to me.